Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hey, how's it going, Jason?
It's pretty good. Good night. It's nice and warm tonight, and it's starting to feel like with the longer days and the warmer weather that maybe we finally have spring.
But are your winter tires off yet? That's the question.
Yes, they are.
Yes, mine too. I think 2 weekends ago, and while I did have to drive in one snow squall with summer tires on, I don't regret my time at all.
We've got a lot to talk about. But before we get going on that, Scott, if you are a new listener to our podcast, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about?
We talk about soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We talk a lot about Cavalry FC and the Calgary Wild. But at this time of year, we talk a lot about the Alberta Premier League, formerly League One Alberta, specifically the Calgary-based teams. But basically, all levels of soccer in Calgary, we try to cast a pretty wide net over that topic.
Yeah, and this week we're going to talk about Calgary Wild. We were at their home opener last weekend. We'll do a review of that and preview their next game. Cavalry FC, a review of their last weekend's match and also their match this weekend. We're going to talk about the Canadian Championship, and this is such a cool story. Calgary Blizzard is going to be playing CF Montreal, and we're going to talk about that. And we're going to also get ready to go for the first weekend of the Alberta Premier League season, talk about the matches coming up, talk about some signings. And we have an interview this week. Scott, who is our interview with?
Yeah, very fittingly, we chatted with Ramon Mifflin, who is the head coach of that Blizzard team that is going to be taking on CF Montreal next week. He's also the head coach of the University of Calgary Dinos, whose players make up most of that Blizzard team. So we talked to him about the upcoming game, but also about the 2026 season as a whole, what it's like to be entering the campaign as defending champions.
Let's kick off with the Canadian Championship and the Blizzard and talk about that big match next week.
My name is Mo Gander, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So the Canadian Championship, which ultimately leads to the Voyageurs Cup, starts next week. And there are two Calgary-based teams in the competition this year for the first time ever. Cavalry is playing, but our focus right now is about the game on Wednesday night when the Calgary Blizzard are off to Montreal.
Yeah, this is history in the making. First time a club team from Calgary will be taking on MLS opposition. Such a cool story, Jason. Blizzard made it to this tournament thanks to their League One Alberta Championship in 2025. They were drawn to play CF Montreal. And yeah, that game will be at Stade Saputo Wednesday evening, 5:30 p.m. kickoff Calgary time, for a chance to play the winner of another round one game between Vancouver FC and Langley United. And that game would be held in early July. But quite the task ahead for these Blizzard players next week.
Yeah, it's going to be quite the experience for them. If people don't really have a good idea of what this team is all about for composition of players, I think probably the best way to describe it is essentially the University of Calgary Dinos men's team, with some additions, but that's sort of the core of this team.
Well, it really is, right? Like head coach Ramon Mifflin is also head coach of the UFC Dinos. And if you look at the roster, kudos to you, Jason, for compiling the players we know who are on this team. And it essentially is the University of Calgary right now, right? You've got the Plenzik brothers, Joey and Marco. We've got James Greco-Taylor, Kimia Kasanda. Lots of guys we've seen wear Dinos jerseys in the fall. The one player I see on here who I know is not a player for the Dinos is in fact an assistant coach for the Dinos, and that is former podcast guest Mo Elgandor.
So the Blizzard haven't been playing in any competitive matches as yet, but one thing they don't have to worry about is, are they going to know each other? They're not a new team that's been thrown together. They would have a lot of familiarity with each other and with the coaches. So from that standpoint, that gives them a little bit of a leg up in the situation compared to a team that's, essentially been only playing together for a matter of weeks.
Yeah, and Ramon gets into that in his interview with us, which we're going to run in a minute. This team has obviously been training together through the winter as the Dinos, and they have been playing friendlies against local opposition. I think Ramon alluded to games against Cavalry even, as well as Mount Royal University. So it is basically still their preseason if you think about the fact that Alberta Premier League is only just kicking off this week. But they are going to be as prepared as they can be given the circumstances. What they may not be prepared for is just the occasion itself, Jason. This is going to be, for a lot of these players, the biggest game of their lives.
Yeah, so it is going to be a real experience for the Blizzard players because I think most all of them have never played professionally. There might be one or two exceptions, but they're going to be playing against a fully professional side, and certainly CF Montreal would be a little bit different, even in comparison to, say, Cavalry, when it comes right down to it.
Oh, of course, right? Montreal, they're not having a great season at the moment in MLS, but yeah, they're, a team that has been in MLS for 15 years now or something. So Montreal is the heavy favorite for this. I mean, I think we aren't thinking that Blizzard is going to win this game, but that aside, it's pretty cool story nonetheless that they're going to be playing in that stadium against those players, right? I'm not sure of that many players on Montreal right now, but to line
Victor
up.
Latourie.
Well, I know Victor Latourie, but I'm trying to think of do they have any DPs who everybody would know? Like when Cavalry played them, remember they had the Kari Sagna, had even he was branded as Bojan Kirkic, but right now I think this roster, I definitely know Victor Latourie, but the other guys, Samuel Piet, being international.
So let's run our interview with Ramon Mifflin now, and he can tell us all about the preparations for the match and what he expects in it. I'd like to welcome Ramon Mifflin to the podcast. Ramon is the head coach of the Blizzard men's team that is going to be playing in the Canadian Championship next week. And he is also the head coach of the Dinos men's team. Welcome back to the podcast, Ramon.
Oh, thank you very much again for having me. And yeah, exciting times. And here to answer a few questions for you guys.
How have the preparations been going for the match coming up? I know last year there was some trouble with Scottish didn't really have a lot of time to prepare. They didn't have time to play real games in advance. So how have you approached it?
It's been better for us because obviously the core of the Dinos boys are with the Blizzard League One team. So we started our preparation around, second week of January, twice a week. And we prepped with games against youth sports teams. And in the last 2 months, as we transitioned into Blizzard League One, a massive thanks to the Calgary and Tommy and his staff for, accommodating us with 3 games against them. So it's been great. It's played MRU a couple of times. We played Cavs 3 times. The team's been training the last month consistently 4 times a week. So I think we're as prepared as we will ever be, especially at this time of year when it's the off season. But it's kind of served us as our preseason for the League One season and for, the big game against Montreal next week.
What do you think would be the success in this match beyond the final score? Is this a game you feel is truly winnable for Blizzard?
Again, it's a very humbling experience for us and to be in this realm with an MLS club, right? So I think that we haven't even focused on just talking about the score or talking about how we're approaching this thing. All we really talk about is just be prepared, be fit, be ready to have courage, be ready to be disciplined, be ready to be organized, and then what will be, right? It's I know the boys are buzzing, they're excited. The club, it's a historic moment for Blizzard Soccer Club, playing in their first Canadian Championship. So we believe in ourselves. Like anybody would. We think we can go out there and disrupt. We have a lot of young players that can run. And, like my father taught me in this game, beating 11 fit players is pretty hard. So we're just going to go out there on the pitch, enjoy the experience. I think this is a massive for everybody, the club and the team, even for the League One environment here in Calgary. So we're going to go out there and do our best, and hopefully we catch them in us and having a good night and get some breaks our way, and the boys being inspired. So you never know what can happen out there.
I want to talk about the players on the team. Like, we noticed the announcements on social media, and it's lots of Dinos connections. I think most everybody that's been announced has been playing for Dinos pretty much, except Mo. But Can you talk about that connection, and is that going to help with chemistry, and also just talk about some of the players on the team in general?
This has been about a 2-year process going between League One and the university. The nice thing is, at Blizzard, we believe in that homegrown path, with just players going from the youth level to this level. We have 9 homegrown Blizzard players that, fortunately played for University of Calgary, and kind of it's all linked up, right? Being the coach on the university and then Blizzard. So it's been a consistent work in progress the last couple of seasons. We've had, really good results. Last year, we tied MRU for first place in the Prairies. They obviously went on to a national final and did great in representing us in that stage. And then we won the League One, right? Which it was a nice continuation of the 2-year program, like 2-year window we've been working on. So it's been exciting. We really know each other. There's good chemistry. There's just good transparency within the group. Our leaders, obviously, Long and Nora, as our captain with Marco and Joy Plensick, who have been, from the Blizzard days with the university and now leading the League One team. Kimia Cassandra, who's also been great for us. Soliman Arya, James Greco Taylor. And those are kind of the key components to this team success, right? And they're experienced footballers when it comes to League One and university. Right now, when you play in MLS group, we obviously lack the experience there, but they've done well at the stage they're in. So they're excited for this one opportunity. It might be the only one that they get to be able to go out there and represent Calgary, Alberta, League One at the highest stage.
Going into the second AL season, Alberta Premier League, I mean, what do you think you and any players learned in Montreal, and how do you think the team's approach or evolved compared to the first few years of this?
It's just from my, humble opinion, it's a hard proposition, the League One APL, when it's a short season, right? So I know in Quebec and Ontario and BC, they get longer seasons. So you kind of disrupt a little bit the process. You get together for 3 months, you get a champion, and then you wait, 8-9 months to play in the Canadian Championships, right? But it's a great platform. It really is. I have the luck that I keep the boys together with the university league. So that's definitely an advantage for us compared to other clubs. So it is hard. It is not the best kind of outline that the season has, but it's the best we can do, right? And it's always a work in progress. I think it's a great platform for the young players. There's been APL. There's been a lot of 16, 17, 18-year-olds playing in it, which they can provide that platform for them to go into university, to be looked at by the Calgary. Obviously the Calgary has a League One team. So I think we're still at the, baby steps of the league, and we're always trying to see how we can improve it. But it is a very good league, and we're excited that we won the league and we get to represent Alberta in the Canadian Championships, in this, next week in Montreal.
You mentioned about how the APL is short season. I guess right now what I wanted to ask is, like, what would you see would be a way to maybe extend it? Or do you see a pathway where maybe there could be something that could be a little bit more, like, for example, players that are graduating from university and players that are trying to sort of want to have a longer season? Do you see the APL as being a vehicle for that? Or do you see something else that could maybe happen, like some kind of second division? Or what are your thoughts about that?
I think that's a very good question. I think it all comes down to the number of players in the province, right? Like BC, Ontario, Quebec just have sheer numbers, big numbers of footballers out there. So you have a lot of players that are they're playing still after university, still playing. They have a professional stint. Us here, we don't have those numbers yet. The core of players that are playing in the EPL, I would say, are university and youth players. So there's a few players. I would say, 15, 20% are players that are still trying to play at a high level after the fact, right? So we could get lots of numbers, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28-year-olds playing in this league that have, just a good playing experience. it'll be better, right? And I think time will help with that. Just implementing this league to play, hopefully, instead of 3 months, playing 4 or 5 months. I don't know how we could do it, but extending the league to a couple months without that core of university players, if that makes sense, where you have players outside of the university league playing, and then the league will be better. But unfortunately, the APL has 5, or 6 Calgary teams now, and it's a lot of players, it's a lot of teams for what the city can provide, right? So we don't have a lot of players coming from other provinces to play the APL either. So we got to focus on what we have. And to add to that, you got to add a lot of youth players that are capable of playing in the APL again, because it is a very good league. So I think, again, it's baby steps and just kind of see what this evolves into in the next couple of years.
Maybe Ramon, from you about goals for the season. Obviously, Blizzard have the goal already of and the incentive of getting to compete professional opposition. But I would imagine that if the goal is to repeat that in 2026.
Yeah, we have a very competitive group. They're very driven, disciplined, young players. For me, the goal would be obviously to try to win the league again. We know it's a hard league with a lot of good teams, so that's obviously the end game to this season. But also to provide the opportunity to younger players from Blizzard to play at that level, right? We have a lot of young, exciting players coming up through the ranks at Blizzard, so I would like to provide that opportunity for them to step into the APL environment and give them that opportunity, because at the end of the day, that's what we as a youth club mainly is to provide that platform for them. We understand we're not a pro club, we're a youth club now, a League One club or APL club, and we want to create that pathway for the youth to be able to showcase themselves in this league and obviously try to win it.
Okay. Do you have a message for the fans out there going forward into this upcoming match and the APL season in general?
No, just support us as best as they can. We're having a watch party at a banquet next Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. for all the Blizzard fans. Just support us. We're super excited about this opportunity. We've been waiting a long time for it. We prepare as fast as we can, and let's see what we can put up on the field, and know that we will put everything in our end to be able to go out there and compete and put a good show for the fans.
Hi, this is Grace Doherty, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So let's segue over to talk about Calgary Wild's 2026 season opener last Saturday at McMahon Stadium. A frigid evening, Jason, snow flurries pretty much throughout this game. You and I were both at McMahon. Fortunately, it didn't go that well for the Wild, suffering a 2-0 loss off of 2 goals from Elise Bennett. A strong first half from the Wild, I thought. They really held their defensive shape and they hit the crossbar a couple of times, but it really unraveled in the second half, didn't it?
I thought their first half was, unlucky. They could have had a couple occasions where they could have, should have scored, but second half, it did not go well. In the post-game press conference, manager Sinead McSherry said that coming out of the halftime break, Montreal made some adjustments and they weren't able to adequately compensate for that. So it didn't go so well. They just didn't look good in that second half. I don't really know what else to say. That second goal was not great, and it was a bit disheartening, I thought, overall. I know it was probably tough being out there playing in that weather and everything like that, but still, it didn't really end well for the Wild. Yeah,
the expression that comes to mind is chasing shadows, right? I think the Wild were turning the ball over quite a bit in the second half, and the defenders were unable to follow the speed of play that Montreal was playing with. And 2-0 is probably a fair result. As mentioned, though, unlucky first half to go in without a goal, having hit the crossbar a few times and forcing a couple of decent saves. But what else can we mention about this game, Jason? I guess the fact that our starting 11 predictions were pretty far off.
Yeah, well, we knew that Michaela Moore was injured, but I think we both had Sarita Thurton and Ali Hess on our starting 11, and Sarita Thurton didn't dress and Ali Hess was on the bench, and I think both of them are nursing injuries. Last year, a lot of the talk, partway through the year was about how the team has so many injuries and they're having a hard time with all their injuries. And here we are, our first week of the season, and we already have Michaela Moore, Ali Hess, Sarita Thurton, Maya Jones, Anderson Williams, Farkuna Mataj. We have many injured players already.
Yeah. There was a cohort of injured players watching from the press box at McMahon. So hopefully, those injuries aren't going to keep them off the pitch for too long. But you're right in the sense that, like, game one, to see that many players on the injured list is not great. In terms of other talking points of this one, Jason, we could also mention we both thought that Caitlin Talbot was going to get the start. In the end, it was Molly Race, Calgary native, who I believe grew up in the Okanagan in Vernon, but playing in her hometown, playing for her hometown team. She got the start. And then another big talking point, I think, is the fact that Tora Betteridge started at center back, the 17-year-old.
Yeah, the future University of Michigan player. She did not really look out of place out there. She played pretty well. She didn't let the hugeness of the moment playing in a pro game at 17, and it didn't overwhelm her. She played, I think, overall pretty well, and kudos to her. I'm not sure if it's ideal that you have to play a 17-year-old on a youth permit, but in your first match as a starter. But I think she did admirably, and I was impressed.
Yeah, definitely a great performance from her. I would say that, like you kind of alluded to there, it kind of signals some alarms to me that this team doesn't appear to have a lot of depth in that position. If Michaela Moore is injured, there's not a lot of experience at center back. If you think about her defensive partner was Tilly James, who, as we mentioned in our last episode, is not a natural center back. I think her first choice is to play fullback. So we had someone who has only played a handful of professional games at center back lining up alongside a high school senior. So what do you think about that?
I agree. Like, that's, to me, not good. It's not a good situation. They have two natural center backs on the roster, Michaela Moore and Talia White. And we know Michaela Moore is nursing an injury, but Talia White, natural center back, she was on the bench. And as far as we understand, she was not injured. So Coach Sinead McSherry chose Tilly James, who is not a natural center back, and Tora Betteridge, who in her first pro match ever as a 17-year-old, chose those two players to play center back ahead of Talia White. So we kind of ran into this last year where Lydia Bedford did something similar, where they were scrambling around in one match and were playing Sonia O'Neill in center back and leaving Talia White on the bench. Like, I like Talia White a lot. I think local Calgary player, but I kind of feel like this is not really an overwhelming vote of confidence for her from the coaching staff. Like, if I was sitting on the bench right now watching this and thinking, why am I not out there? Wouldn't you think that, Scott?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And yeah, you're right. This is exactly the thing we talked about multiple episodes last season.
So I don't know. They've got 2 more roster spots available. I just really, really think they need to bring in a center back, because even if you say that somehow they have confidence in Talia White, that still only leaves them with 2 center backs. Yeah. Like, I don't really know too many teams that can survive on 2 center backs through a whole season.
And I know who I think should fill one of those spots.
Yes, I do. Izzy Monk, am I correct?
Yeah. As I mentioned in a text last week, I think she would be very welcomed at the Wild at the moment.
After you sent that text, I tried to check out some social media, and from what I can tell, she is still in Arizona, because I saw some posts on Instagram where she was still down in Arizona, like a couple weeks ago, like in April still. So I'm presuming she must be finishing off her exams or whatever. So from everything I know, she has designs on playing professional. So I don't know what her plan is, if she's got something already lined up in Europe or elsewhere. But I would say right now, it's probably safe to assume that she's not going to NWSL this year, because if she was, she'd be there already. So I don't know. Does that mean she could show up, at the Wild training camp next week? I guess it's possible. Or she's got something already set up overseas. I don't know. But but I'm quite sure that, she's going to want to play somewhere. So,
and why not with two of her former Memphis teammates
and her sister.
And her sister. Yeah, exactly.
And the other thing I think we should probably mention is the crowd was announced at 3,500. I'm not sure if that was tickets sold or how exactly that worked, but I do want to say, respect to the fans. I think that staying out there in that match, it was great. I was nicely in the confines of the press box, and I was thinking, geez, I'm being out there would be really hard today. And we even heard from some members of the Wild organization who unprompted mentioned that as well. So I think, again, well done, fans that were out there.
Yeah, I was out there for the first half shooting photos and about 20 minutes of the second half before I decided to pack it in and come join you in the press box. My fingers were pretty frozen at that point. It wasn't that cold on the thermometer. I think it was like hovering around 0 or -5 maybe, but I think with the wind and the snow flurries, it just really contributed to the wind chill. And yeah, it was a chilly one for sure. And the Wild will be back in action this Saturday, 3 p.m. They'll be taking on Ottawa Rapid in the nation's capital.
Yeah, and Ottawa is also winless. They're 0-1, just like the Wild are. They lost to Halifax in Halifax last weekend, 3-1. That's a very positive start for that club after kind of a dismal first year.
Definitely.
Hi, this is Ali Musi, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, Scott, let's talk about Cavalry FC. I guess a good place to start would be their match last weekend. It was on Saturday against Inter Toronto at Spruce Meadows and ended up in a 1-1 draw.
Somehow, yeah. I watched the first half of this one live before driving to McMahon to watch the Wild game. And at halftime, it was 1-1. But I was certain that Cavalry was going to win this game. They had been cruising, generated plenty of chances, made Toronto look the way that Montreal made the Wild look in the second half. Cavalry's goal came off a glancing header from Dan Klomp, off of a perfect dead ball delivery from the right. And I thought that was going to be the first of many of the afternoon, but good job to Inter Toronto for equalizing. Thomas Skublak, who I'd completely forgotten about as a CPL observer, but he had a great goal off of a corner kick. Inter Toronto's first corner kick of the half in the 40th minute to tie things up, and the second half ended up kind of a stalemate after that. But yeah, that was a nice header from Skublak, I thought, Jason.
Yeah, it was. It was well taken for sure. So I think overall, probably a bit disappointing from Cavalry point of view, just getting the 1 point, dropping a couple points, but the club remains undefeated and they're in second place with 8 points, behind Forge, who has 10. So they're in a pretty good place overall when you look at the tables. I think look back at their April, it's probably overall one of their most successful Aprils in franchise history.
Yeah, they've gone unbeaten in April before, but I remember it was all draws that they got. So this is definitely, by Cavalry standards, a really strong start to the season. They've generally started quite slow, but yeah, 2 wins and 2 draws from their first 4 games, and still within a few points of Forge, who are having a really strong start and haven't actually conceded a goal yet. So as you and I actually talked about a bit at the Wild game, it definitely feels like it's going to be a 2-horse race this season, especially with Ottawa being in a rebuild. I'm looking forward to Cavalry's game this weekend in particular because it will be the first time that they take on FC Supra.
Yeah, they're going to play Supra on Sunday afternoon at 1 p.m. at Stade Boreal. It is the Supra's first match there after playing their first couple of matches at the University of Montreal. Should be interesting. Supra is in third place right now. When you look at the table, they're the next team behind Cavalry. They've got 2 wins and a loss in 3 games.
They've got some players who really intrigued me. Loic Quemi at striker, I think, has looked great in the games that I've seen of Supra. And obviously, they're coming in as the new club in the CPL, and there's a lot of excitement, I think, in Quebec for this team. So I think it's going to be a big crowd, and Cavalry is going to be in tough because that crowd is going to be rooting against them.
For sure. I'm looking forward to it, and it should be another good test for the Cavs, and we'll see what happens on Sunday afternoon.
Hi, this is Anson Minty, and you're listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
Let's wrap up our episode with discussion of the Alberta Premier League opening weekend. Some Friday night games happening in both Calgary and the Edmonton area. In terms of local teams, Jason, we already mentioned some of these games in our last episode, but on the women's side, we'll see the Calgary Wild U21s taking on Villains at the Maxwell Soccer Center at 3:30 p.m. Pretty early kickoff. And Cavalry's reserves will be taking on Villains 6 p.m. kickoff at SAIT.
And up in Edmonton, I guess the Edmonton metro area, Callies will be taking on St. Albert, and Rangers will be taking on BTB.
Yeah, both on the men's and women's sides.
I did my bit of research here, Scott. There have been a flurry of player announcements this week for all the different clubs, and there are a few players actually that I think are still not announced, but I put together a bit of a list. Is there anything in there that caught your attention?
Well, we've known for a little bit that Fraser Aird was going to play for Foothills in the APL this summer, and that definitely caught my attention. And so far, that Foothills team is looking pretty stacked with a lot of professional experience.
Yeah, Chinan Chanda is going to be on that team. Marcus Kaiser, former Cavalry player who played out in BC at UBC. Miguel DeRocha, not Royal player who had a great career. And Robert Woodruff Brown, who burned up the ACAC with SAIT last year, and I think he's off to Lethbridge this year. He's going to be out there. So, yeah, they've got a good bunch there.
And other players we know who've been announced by other clubs, Anson Minty for Callies, Skylar Rogers, former Cavalry player and Mount Royal University player, signed with Rangers, as well as former third-choice goalkeeper at Cavalry, Nevin Fuster.
And on the women's side, a couple of familiar names we want to mention. For the Villains women, Isabella Chance and Danielle Lehman, who are two University of Saskatchewan players, are going to be playing for Villains. Isabella Chance, I believe, was in second place last year in the Golden Boot race as a high schooler. So she's back. Rangers, I think this is interesting. You don't often see this. There's actually going to be a Dinos player playing for a non-Blizzard team.
Yeah, Grace Moore, who has had a couple of really strong seasons for the Dinos women's team, scoring lots of goals. Rather than Blizzard, she's going to be playing with Rangers this summer.
And the Foothills women's team, I guess to no one's surprise, it's got a roster of pretty notable names. Former podcast guest and Golden Boot winner last year, Avril Jameson, rejoins the team. Izzy DePalma, Kate Storty, the Grisdale sisters, and also another former podcast guest making her return after quite a while being injured. Grace Masala is going to be playing for Foothills.
Yeah, I think that if she is at full fitness, that is a great get for Foothills. And I know last year we thought that Foothills was going to walk the league since so many of their former UWS team was going to be playing in Alberta Premier League, Jason, but it's way too early to predict what's going to happen. But looking at the signings thus far, you have to look at Foothills and go like, oh yeah, they have some players for sure.
Mm-hmm. All right, Scott, I think we're done for this episode, but what do you think? We did twice a week last year, and APL season starting. Maybe it's time to start getting back to doing some Monday recap episodes.
Yeah, I think that's the right choice, especially with how busy the weekends are getting, and waiting until Thursday to talk about games that happened, 4 or even 5 days previously just doesn't make as much sense, especially with these APL games that happen on Friday nights. So definitely think it's a good time to go back to doing the twice a week episode releases.
All right, so instead of having to wait a week, we should have an episode up and available on Monday morning. So looking forward to that.
Me too.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this podcast downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or other platforms. Check out our website at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other options to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links there so you can buy Scott's book. It's called Here Come the Cavalry, and it's all about Calgary's pro soccer history. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media such as X or Instagram or Blue Sky, where our username is @YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.